Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of About Time with me, Chris Nichols. As you know, this is a series where I get the chance to talk to people whose work inspires and influences me and inspires and influences many people, and where I just want the world to have a chance to know more about them. And I'm delighted that today's guest is Peter Reeson. Peter, welcome. I'm delighted you're here.
Thank you.
So, it, might be best to start with just saying, you know, uh, what do you do these days? I mean, how do you introduce yourself to people?
Uh, well, I call myself a writer, and people say, then what do you write about? And depending on the circumstance, I might say, well, I'm writing about conversations with rivers. Um, and I might say, well, I'm a non-fiction nature writer. And I'm all sorts of different things. But I'm a writer. I value words, carefully written prose as a means of engaging with the more than human world. And I'm interested in really pushing the boundary of how we experience ourselves as humans in that world, not as superior beings, but as part of the ecology, or as Thomas Berry used to talk about, the communion of beings on the planet. So that's what I'm interested in. How far I go about revealing that really depends on how crazy I'm willing to be seen as.
Yeah. Mm. And when did you start doing writing of that kind and calling yourself a writer in that way?
Oh, when I retired, I mean, quite clearly, I was a university professor, I was a teacher, I was a researcher, and I mean, there's a strand of writing in my family. There's a strand of art in my family which I am no good at all. And there's a strand of writing in my family, and I feel I've picked that up. My grandfather wrote several books. My aunt wrote several books. Both my aunts wrote several books. My nephew is a writer professionally, and so on and so forth. So writing comes fairly naturally to me as a thing you do. And I'm quite interested in that sort of heritage, family heritage.
Mm.
Oh, I left university. I retired from university, and I went off and did a master's in creative writing.
And that was at Bath Spa, was it?
Spa, which at
Yeah. Mm.
that time was a very good degree. I'm not sure how good it is now. And my aim was to become a nature writer. Um, and increasing, well, then you'd have to go right back to the beginning.
Please do.
Well, um, see, my story, well, I can start many places. My story starts in Cleveland, Ohio, but I'm doing a PhD, and I'm wanting to research the relationship between two people, two-person relationships, dyads of all sorts. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to work out how to do that, because I've got all these methodologies and none of them fit, they just don't fit. And so I was walking down Adelbert Street, actually, and I can almost tell you which paving stone it was that my foot hit on, when I realized that I didn't need to be a researcher of other people's relationships. I need to be a facilitator of people researching their own relationships. So that got me into the notion of participatory research and participatory action research, which was what I spent my professional life doing, as you will know from the master's
Mm.
program. And and that's fine. There's a lot of practical work to be done there. But I also realized that once you start asking people to be researchers of their own relationship, you've undercut the whole of Western epistemology. Because the Western ways of knowing depend on the separation of the knower from the known, the subject and the object, that old dualism which haunts us. So I needed to understand what, if you do that, what do you mean by good research? What do you mean by validity or quality or anything like that? So that took me into a whole lifelong research into um, what I called at first a participatory worldview,
Yeah.
as opposed to a separate worldview. And that's a long story, because I'm talking 1974
Is that when you were doing the PhD?
during the PhD. So that's quite a long time
Yeah.
ago. And so, one of the things that clearly, as the ecological crisis catastrophe gathered momentum,
Mm.
as we began to understand it, I realized that, it wasn't just a question of, participatory research was a humanist endeavor. It was about people, it was about liberating people. But there's a whole set of relationships with the more than human world. And actually, that seemed to me to be where my heart was. Um, and so the sense of engaging with the human world, more than human world, in various kinds of ways, and has become my passion. And that's where the most recent work is, where I've been facilitating a series of online cooperative inquiries into this question: what is it like? What does it mean to engage with the wider world, not as a set of objects, but as a communion of beings? And so that's what I'm writing about.
So after your PhD, Peter, I mean, and that you did that in the States, yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So were you then an academic in the States?
No, no, no. We came back straight away. The idea was to go for 4 years, and we had the children there. And in the meantime, the British society was changing enormously. My parents were getting older. We'd always intended to come back, so we did. And I came back, and I was lucky enough to get some research jobs that worked for a while, until I was offered a position, temporary position, short time contract, first of all at Bath, to engage in organisation research, organisation development. And I stayed at Bath and moved from being a temporary research fellow to being a professor, from being taking other people's jobs to, with Judy Marshall in particular, to running the Centre for Action Research in Professional Practice. And also with Judy, moving ourselves. She was interested, her concern was with feminism, and continued to be so, and women in management and stuff like that. But we both saw that we had to address the ecological issues as well. So while we were at Bath, we were teaching, we were doing the research, we were teaching the undergraduate course, we were teaching courses in thinking about ecology, we called them, where we'd start off with relatively sort of mainstream managementy kind of things and get more and more radical through the semester.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
about that time, Jill Coleman, who you will remember, of course, who's still
Yeah,
around,
yeah.
goodness, Jill Coleman joined the New Academy of Business, which Anita Roddick had set up. And she, Anita, and she said, we need a master's degree in ecological management or something like that.
Yeah.
And she came to see me and said, what would you think about doing this? And I said, I think we've got far too much to do at the moment. We can't take on another program. And
Right.
Judy disagreed with me. So, so we did it. Oh, we did it. And in my own personal story, we sat, I remember sitting in Judy's living room with Jill, sketching out the elements of this program, what would be the inputs and what would be the process. And it was quite clear to all of us that the process of the degree was one of inquiry. Inquiry, as the Americans say, inquiry, as we say. And so the idea was to invite people who were pioneers. I remember Judy sitting there, and when our recruit introduction, we're looking for pioneers in the field. We don't know what we know the field, the areas, but we don't know the answers. So the purpose of this master's degree is to develop a community of inquiry into what does what does it mean? What does it mean to act as a professional sustainability facilitator, let's say?
Yes.
And so we envisaged the thing from the beginning as a group of leading people who would be inquiring into that. And through that, just should I carry on with the story? Through that, I met Stephen
Please
Hard.
do.
I mean, I remember in that first meeting we had, and I was saying, well, the one thing we've got to have in this program is some kind of encounter with the more than human world, with the natural world, as we would have said then. And I went down to Schumacher College and met um, Satish Kumar and, of course, um,
Stefan and Brian.
Stefan Harding. And
Yeah.
we really hit it off, Stefan and I, and designed a week-long deep ecology program. And Stefan introduced me to Animate Earth and deep ecology work. I knew something of it, but I didn't know it as experientially and as passionately as he did. And that's like on and on and on. And when we started the current series of programs, the Living Waters, which is the inquiry programs I mentioned earlier, Stefan, bless him, was a very key staff member. And
Yeah.
Stefan is, of course, no longer with us. So I would deeply honour his influence on my life, although I've got other influences as well, of course.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of those other influences. But yeah, I have a list of people who I would love to be on this podcast who can't be, and Stefan is one. But hopefully Julia is going to come on and talk about her life at Schumacher and her life with Stefan, and Brian obviously would be brilliant, and Chris Seeley, who Chris and I taught at Schumacher um, short courses for many years together, and I knew her through our connection. We met when the master's degree moved to Ashridge, and Chris and I taught it together.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's lots of connections. But so who? Yeah, I mean, you have done so much. Where do you even start when you start talking about your influences?
People have influenced me. Well,
Mm,
there's the whole field of participatory action research in its many guises, because participatory research encompasses everything from organization development in the West to humanistic psychology through to um, what do they call it? Liberation ecology, liberation theology,
yeah,
and stuff like that. And so it's a huge field.
yeah,
Among the people, I mean, I met John Heron when I came back to England. John Heron and I worked together very closely, uh, pioneering cooperative inquiry as a specific work. I was just talking yesterday to my friend colleague David Peters, who runs the British Holistic Medical Association. And in many ways, that is indebted in its foundation to people who were part of the Holistic Medical Project. And all these I will mention, they're all, by the way, on my website. There's the
yeah,
report that is on the website and some more recent writing about that.
yeah.
But
And
John,
Peter, we will make sure that we get from you any links so that people who want to can follow up all of this on your website and elsewhere. Yeah.
uh,
Mm.
so John Heron was important, and about the same time, Bill Torbett, who was very interesting, taking quite a different line into what he called action inquiry. Uh,
Mm.
while we were saying we're going to set up these inquiry groups, which are specifically for an inquiry process, Bill had a different kind of thing. His notion was, how do we take inquiry into every moment of our lives, both as human beings and as organization members? So he was another important influence, hugely important influence. I wouldn't want to name anybody particularly, but from the black researchers, colleagues that I knew in America, and also
Wow.
from feminists. My friend Marianne introduced me to radical feminism at some stage in our just big co-students together. And Judy carried on with that kind of work. And then there's an interesting whole bunch of people who are out of the Roman Catholic Church. So obviously, one is Thomas Berry, who I was privileged to meet and to interview for when he published his book,
Oh, yeah.
The Great Turning, no, The Great Work.
Yeah, it's a great work. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely wonderful, generous man. It was like being in the company of a saint in some sort of strange kind of way.
Yeah.
Um,
And you know, Drew Dellinger talks about him in the same way. Yeah.
Same kind of way, yes. I
Yeah. Yeah.
know slightly. He's just had put a lovely piece on Substack about Thomas.
Mm.
And you know, you hear from other people who I don't know personally, like Mary Evelyn Tucker, about the extraordinary, and Brian Swim, Brian Swim, as cosmologist, as that's the right word, who I met
Yeah.
last year, time again. Um, and then, and so not so much out of the church, but just it's very interesting to see how the radical Catholic Church is actually very radical. So another one will
Mm.
be the I'm losing my people. Um,
Yeah.
Original Blessing.
Matthew.
Matthew Fox, of course.
Yes, Matthew. So
Matthew
so radical, so radical. I think he was actually excommunicated or something.
in his own church, yes.
Yes. Yes.
Um, I read Original Blessing,
Uh,
which wonderful book, and he came over at Anita's bidding. I think bidding's the right word actually to teach on the master's degree. And you know, it's very interesting in the process of this work, and also the work we did with humanistic psychology. We've had so many interesting people sit at our dining room table as hosts.
yeah.
We've had them in Bath. And another one, of course, is Joanna, dear Joanna, who brings tears to my eyes. She died, what, last week, the week before?
Last week. Yeah. Mm.
Extraordinary, extraordinary woman. Um, I mean, and both in writing but also in face to face,
Mm.
her ability to deeply engage people.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Mm.
those are all, and then other
Yeah.
people at a
Yeah.
great distance. I hope I'm not leaving anybody out. And
No, well, it's
students,
students. Yes.
graduate, well, all sorts of graduate students. But you know,
Yeah.
I used to say that you'd have an interview or a discussion with a graduate student about their work, and you'd make some suggestion that seemed to you to be a bit radical, and they'd come back a month later having done something even more radical themselves. So, pushing the field, developing the
Yeah.
field.
Yeah.
So,
And you know, although um, you know, I think one of the intellectual side of it, of course, was important, and the rigor's important, and it was a degree program. But this field of connections has, you know, is alive now, and there's so much work going on, really good work going on, because of the graduates of the program, their connection to Schumacher, and this web of people doing stuff. It's just an amazing creation. Yeah.
yeah, it's very good.
Yeah.
Uh, and again, the ideas are important, but um, the practice is
Mm.
mental. Um, I mean, the ideas will facilitate practice, and the practice will come back into the ideas. But if we stay in our heads all the time, thinking about the philosophy of this, it's important to do that. But it's also important to do what we're doing in the Living Waters program, to actively engage in different
Yeah.
ways with different kinds of actively engage with river. So
Yeah.
so when I retired, what was I going to do with myself? And
Yeah.
and it seemed to me that the bit that excited me most, and there's a bit of me that feels I should be slow marching down streets with just stop oil, or engaging with Extinction Rebellion. But, there is another job to be done, and it's about undercutting, like I'd said in my first notion of this participant, undercutting the Western worldview. It's not only the Western worldview, because it's been kind of adopted more widely across the globe.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a real job in undercutting that worldview and showing that the world is alive, and the world is open to communication with us. And once you start doing that, it doesn't happen all the time, because it's a moment of grace when the world responds to you.
Mm.
But when you call to River and say your prayers to River, and the response is a little shower of rain on an otherwise dry day, for example, or 4 kingfishers turn up one after the other in response to a gift to the river, there's something else going on. There's more things on heaven and earth than are conceived in your philosophy, said the great Shakespeare. And you know that this is actually true. This
Yeah.
is so, and the words don't encompass it. And that's where the writing comes in, because try to describe some of these experiences in ways that engage with other people is the other challenge.
Yeah. And was your after you retired and after you wrote the sorry, after you retired, you did the master's degree. Is that when you did the first of your voyages,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
as inquiry? As inquiry.
absolutely. It was while I was doing the
Yeah.
master's degree, and everybody out there, most people were novelists, and
Yeah.
writing biographical fiction and stuff like that, memoir. And I suddenly thought, well, I'm going to take my boat, Coral, little yacht, little old yacht, it was 31 foot, quite small. Uh, I'm going to take it to the west coast of Ireland. I'm going to go to the Blasket Islands, and that's what the book's going to be about. I'm going to go as a pilgrimage. Well, I didn't use the word pilgrimage to start with, but I'm going to go in order to engage with the world as a sentient presence. And so that's what I did. And I did it I did it in the Easter vacation of the course, which is actually quite early to go out on the west coast of Ireland. There's nobody else there. I mean, I went later in the summer, and it's quite relatively busy. But
Right.
the Basket Islands in April was bleak and frightening and mysterious, and quite
Uh,
extraordinary.
and pretty windy generally in a
Yeah.
small boat.
It was windy at times. Yes, it was very windy at times.
Uh,
But yes, and I was on my own.
yeah.
Uh, this was the whole point of it. So engaging on my own in that kind of way, and extraordinary things happening, like well, they weren't extraordinary. A pod of maybe 30 or 40 dolphins accompanying Coral and me for more than an hour as we sailed.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and I just it, and going sailing around the Blasket Islands, not the Blasket Islands, the Skellig Rocks,
Yeah.
which most people will only know from Star Wars. But there are these magical rocks which had a community of monks on them for many years, and yeah. So that was
Mm.
Spindrift, a pilgrimage, wilderness pilgrimage at sea, and then 2 years later, I took Coral up with people joining me here and there, but primarily single-handed. I spent the whole year in chunks, the whole summer, the whole season, sailing from Cornwall up to round the west coast of Ireland, up through Jura, the Sound of Jura, to Oban, and then the next year, that's right, the next year went on up to, I didn't get as far as Cape Wrath, but I got a long way north
Right.
and spent a long time in the Summer Islands, for example. And and
Yeah, brilliant.
and that was, yeah, I mean, one of the things really got interested in was the notion of different sorts of time. So there's the sort of the time, clock time, but then
Hmm.
there's the I can't remember exactly what I called it, but there was Earth time. That's right, Earth time, which for a sailor is represented by the tides, by the sun and the moon going over, and then
Mm.
so so that was represented when I sat in the Summer Isles north of the words go out of my mind at my age,
Mm.
north of Ullapool, and I
Mm.
sat there for 3 days watching the sun and the moon. This is midsummer in Scotland, long, 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 long time. And then I went on north to and actually in quite strong winds. And I realised there's also this notion of the eternal now, this moment which you seize,
Yeah.
which is forever. And of course, when you're doing strange things in a yacht in a gale and a lot of wind on your own, that's very important to catch those moments. So that
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
really interesting for me. And yeah,
Mm. Yeah. One of the things I love about doing these conversations is the connections between episodes and between guests. And just last week, I had Elizabeth McManus, who I've known for years, who's these days she calls herself a contemplative creative, but many, many years of Zen practice. And this idea of the eternal now is yeah, if you catch that episode, you'll see loads of connections. I will say to people, worth listening to this one and to Elizabeth's close together because there's a lot they can say to each other.
of course, that reminds
Uh,
me of a mission in my.
yeah.
You asked me who my influences, where the other one is
Mm.
person is John Crook, who was a
Yeah.
charm Buddhist master and a close friend. He and I and Peter Hawkins, Malcolm Parlett, Peter Tatum were in a men's group together. We were a men's group together for um, 30 years.
Oh wow. Okay.
And yeah,
Wow.
we kept laughing
Yeah.
at what was going to happen when the first of us died. And so we did one after the other. They're not all gone, but one, Peter got dementia, which was very sad. Then John suddenly died. And the dynamics of it all shifted. So, but
Yeah.
that was John, a
Mm.
really important intellectual and emotional friend.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not doing
Peter,
the
can I? Oh
the-
no, go on. You go.
often said, I've often thought, I collaborate with people. I don't, I don't have my own ideas, but collaborating is important. And of course, my
Absolutely.
group of collaborators is um, Freya Matthews, who is a panpsychic philosopher in Australia, and
Mm.
Andreas Faber, who is a biologist, a radical biologist, lives in Berlin and Italy. And you see, I'm losing names again. Oh dear. Um, Sandra Wooltorton. Sandra Wooltorton, who also knew Stefan, who lives in Western Australia, and
Yeah.
Ezekiel Acklin, who joined that group more lately. So all these influences are really important to draw together.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. I mean, Peter, I'm struck by this conversation, by the power of this network and all this web, this deep web of connections of people who've influenced you, people you've influenced, the students, the work. And it feels that this work is so edgy and so important and so necessary now. And yet it seems difficult institutionally to keep this kind of work alive in that, you know, it Schumacher's gone. the program at Bath went, the program then went at Ashridge. A lot of the work at Findhorn's gone. I mean, what's going on?
I think
Or doesn't it? Does the institutional stuff actually not matter that much?
I'm not sure. I think we need the institutions, but there was a
Yeah.
precursor to
Yeah.
all this at the North London Polytechnic,
Really?
yeah,
Oh,
which Judy was external examiner on, and John Southgate and people like that who were developing this whole idea of a community of inquiry. And well, when John is, I think, too old to be doing anything now, incapacitated, but he was a huge influence on an awful lot of people.
yeah.
And so I think these things come and go, and I think you'll find them in the most strange places. So I had a theory once that all the most radical programs, humanistic kind of programs, took place in institutes of technology. So Bath was originally a college, a CAT in those days, a College of Advanced
Yes.
Technology, became a university. The program I did the PhD program I did was at Case Institute of Technology, Case Western Reserve University. So, and there was some strange ability. If you try to go to a psychology school, you get knocked on the head by some. But if you go to a management school or something like that, there's a pluralism there that allows that kind of. Bill Talbot working at Boston. So there's lots of MIT having some really interesting work. So there's lots of finding these temporary homes. Linking like mad to as many people as you can, which of course is facilitated by the internet in the most extraordinary ways. I mean, we're doing all our programs now on these, getting people to go and talk to rivers and stuff like that. They're all online. We've got people.
Mm.
We got people right across the planet. We've had people from Australia, Western Australia, Eastern Australia. We've had people in India. We've had people in Israel, Europe, right across the States, South America to some extent. And it's actually interesting. One of the things that it's taught me is that you have to think about what the planet's doing. So you can't say, we'll do this in the autumn. You have to say, we'll do this in the northern autumn. You can't say, we'll meet at, you have to find the sweet spot in the turning of the earth to know when you can have a Zoom meeting together with your staff. It draws, as we're going away from midsummer, my Australian colleagues are coming into summer, and to realize that that's happening. So we had an inquiry group recently where one woman
Yeah.
in northern Norway with the sun
Yes.
down. We're in the middle of English spring, and the Australians are going into winter. Well, that's very, there's something. Talk about consciousness raising. It's very interesting. It's very, very enlivening to see that happening.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because in the corporate world, you have phone calls like that between countries all the time that don't notice that
Yeah.
that pattern at all.
Yeah. I think it's because we're doing something where people are going out,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I suppose yes, it does happen in the corporate world, but anyway,
But with a different consciousness. Yeah.
different consciousness.
Yeah.
Is this,
Peter,
is this
I
what you?
mean, this is probably a completely unfair question, but at, at this stage in your life and work, as you look at the world, are you still hopeful that good good things can happen in time to change some of the catastrophic patterns that we're already seeing?
Well, I don't like the word hope. I've got an
Uh-huh.
addiction.
Mm.
There's a phrase in there's a phrase I've been trying to learn to sing a song by Sam Lee, the great folk singer.
Uh-huh.
Um, Singing with Nightingale is a wonderful the book, and it's his version of the old Bushes and Briars song that Ralph Vaughan Williams says, and have I got it here? Bushes and briars. I just want to get the words exactly right.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'm uneasy and troubled in my mind. Sometimes I think we've gone too far to turn it round in time. Sometimes I'm plagued with all I should and must and what we'll leave behind. I think we're, I like the idea of we're in a meta crisis. We're not in a poly crisis. We are in a poly crisis, but we're in a
Yeah.
meta crisis in that it's not just there's a lot of problems hitting us at the same time, but there's a fundamental, deeply, deeply fundamental error. I mean, Gregory Bateson wrote one of his chapters called Errors in Epistemology.
Mhm.
Our worldview, the way we understand the world, is not in accord with the way the world actually is. We've got a very powerful manipulative technology which doesn't accord to the world, and that's what is destroying the world. And
Mhm.
for those reasons that I believe the kind of work I'm doing and other people are doing, which is about not about activism, but it's about that finding new ways of thinking. Gregory says the important thing is to learn to think in a new way. The important thing to do is to practice in a new way, which leads to a different worldview. They go hand in hand. They go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Um, I'm just reading Jonathan Porritt's new book. I'm going to review it, where he worked. It's a very important book, I think. I've only just started, but he's working with Just Stop Oil young people.
Yes.
He's exploring what they're doing and arguing their case and arguing the importance of the radical, the truly radical. Um,
Mhm.
and
Yeah. I
he's a great man. And when you read that and you think, well, no, there's no hope. But there's no hope if we carry on doing the same kinds of things as we're doing. That's why I don't think Just Stop Oil and those things are really doing what we need. But uh, I think it's pretty hopeless, actually, if you really come down to it.
yeah. Yeah. I managed to catch Jonathan doing his launch at, or at least a conversation about his book at the Global Tipping Points conference at Exeter University recently. Um, and I was also struck by, the tension that's in that conference between the science of, you know, all of the science on the interconnection between the planetary boundaries is really, really dark now. And at the same time, you've got Tim Lenton writing the new book, which is Positive Tipping Points,
Well,
because there are some things that are, you know, uh, in
but we don't
technologies
know.
and in,
We
there's some
don't
good
know.
stuff going on. Mm,
Joanna Macy would say, I don't know. We don't know what is going to be the outcome of our actions.
mm,
You commit yourself to a life. You commit yourself to what you think is worthwhile. And my other, um, Jean Bolton, in her book on complexity that came out recently, she's saying the same
mm,
thing. If you think of the world as a complex whole, um, you don't know whether this is a critical thing that is shift stuff. I mean, if we did know, we'd be so powerful that we'd be even more dangerous than we are at the moment.
mm.
Uh,
And that's another connection, of course, Peter. Jean has also been on here with her The
yeah,
Tao of Complexity,
yeah,
and there's a lovely link to Bill Critchley, who was on here talking about
yes,
his connection to the Bath
yeah, yeah, yeah,
consulting colleagues and to
yes,
Ralph Stacey, of course. Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So uh, um, I'm slightly frightened that I'll live too long. I mean, I'm in this bizarre situation. I'm 81. I've just had a new knee. I'm supposed to have the other knee done as hopefully as soon as possible. And I think of all that, and it's a big operation, and you have to do all this exercises afterwards, and it's a big investment. Part of me saying, well, I've got to live long enough and do enough stuff to make all this worthwhile. But there's another bit of me saying, not sure about that. I'm not sure how long I want to live. It's very interesting to live this long, and because I can remember, and I've written about this. I remember sitting reading. I think it was probably Picture Post, which is no longer with us, is it? But Picture Post, and seeing a picture of, and I'm trying to remember, was one of the people who was writing about environmentalism back in the early 50s, a picture of a smokestack and dirt and stuff like that. And I remember asking my mother what she thought about this, and said something like, "You don't want to think about that, dear," which is a way of dealing. But it was way, 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 way back then. You can remember all this stuff, and you can remember um, Silent Spring was published the year I was 18.
Yeah. Was that Silent Spring 1960 something?
Yeah,
I can't remember. Yeah,
1960. Anyway, 19.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
64. Yes,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
52.
We've had
Yes,
a lot of people paying a lot of attention to environmental matters for a long time, and a huge, a huge amount of work not pointing in that direction, and has been throughout the whole period. I mean, my first job in sustainability by accident was 43 years ago. When I was in the Department of Energy, my first graduate job, they happened to put me into insulation. You
yes,
know, trying to argue the case for policy to insulate the British housing stock. No interest whatsoever from the government at that time, because um, as a government, we're trying to privatise things, and actually, you wanted more energy sales. The last thing you wanted was
yes,
um, well insulated houses, and that's gone on. That's 40 odd years.
mm,
Yeah,
yes,
it's a
yes.
weird old system sometimes.
Yeah. So you ask about hope. I I think we just have to keep. And I also
Yeah,
think I would say it's not only climate change.
yeah,
It's the impoverishment of the more than human world. There are no cuckoos here in Bath anymore. There are no swifts. This year I haven't seen a swift. We used to have swifts flying high over Bath. I haven't seen them.
right.
Um,
Yeah,
there's all sorts of things like that. And my
yeah,
my friend Mark Cocker wrote the book Our Place, which he points out that we have a bigger population of people involved in the National Trust and the wildlife funds and all these different kinds of things, and yet we're, as a country, one of the most ecologically impoverished in Western Europe, let alone the world. So
yeah,
there's some really strange things going on, and yeah.
yeah. There are, and you know, and at the same time, there are all these hundreds and thousands of people doing great stuff, including many, many of the alumni of the MSc program.
Yes,
Whether it's John Alexander or the Schumacher people as well. Of course, it's not just the MSc, and it's brilliant. It's brilliant to see that.
yes. Yes. And it's very interesting reading Jonathan's book to realize that, there are different places where action can take place. So he's pointing out that the radical the radical shift is important. Every movement, like there was the National
Mm.
Society for the Advancement of Colored People, and then Martin Luther King gets more radical than that. Then Eldridge Cleaver gets more radical than that. And all these people are needed. All these points of view are needed to,
Yeah,
to make anything shift. I think that's a really
yeah,
good argument.
yeah, yes, yes. It's also massive that in many ways, every moment, every conversation, every gesture matters. Which I guess is where some of the action inquiry, the Bill Talbot type action inquiry, and how are we right now, right here.
Yes. And
Um,
how can we
yeah,
create more? I mean, at another level, how can we create more dialogue, more conversations about these kinds of things? And how
yeah,
can we link these questions to questions of democracy and of civil rights. I mean, one of the things I like about Jonathan is he shows how Greta Thunberg, for example, makes the links between Gaza and climate change, and those are important links to make. They're all part of a system which is exploitative, which is extractivist, and we can't go on doing that.
We can't. Peter, we're right up against our 45 minutes. We could probably run a master's degree out of this conversation alone. There's much more we would do, but we should stop. So let me say something to close the episode, and I'll say a proper thank you to you before we finish. So everybody, thank you very much for watching or listening. We will put the links to Peter's website and the books and work he's mentioned. And I'll also try to draw out some of the links to other episodes like the Jean Bolton one, the Elizabeth McManus one, and many others. But Peter, fascinating, enormously generous. Thank you. I'm just so glad you could come and do this.
Thank you. It's been really interesting. Thank you very much.